Being 1 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order, please. Okay, are we recording? Oh, I don't see it. I know that's a little overwhelming. I don't know about a cat. Okay. This is the March 19, 2025 meeting of the Ashland County Planning Committee. It's 1 o'clock, Wednesday, March 19th, and we will begin. So please call the roll.
George Bousset.
Here.
Bradley Ray.
Here.
Sorry about that. Elizabeth Franick. Pat Kinney. Gary Mertig.
Here.
Dan Grady. Liz Radke. Thank you. And Charlie Ortman.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
So for the approval of the agenda, are there any recommendations for modification of the agenda? If not, may I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Brad will move to approve.
Brad Ray approve.
Second.
Approve. Charlie Ortman second. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye, please. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? So we move on with the agenda. Next item on the agenda is the beginning of public comments or beginning of the period public comments. Are we online, Carisha?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody online who would care to make a public comment concerning this agenda or items on the agenda? Nobody online. Anybody present? There being no public comment, we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes of the prior meeting. Everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes of the prior meeting. And are there any corrections, amendments to be proposed? Seeing no hands, I request a motion to approve the minutes of the prior meeting.
Move to approve.
Charlie moves to approve.
Second, Franick.
Second by Liz Pronick. Any discussion? All in favor, please play aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved. Next, we move to our discussion items. And the first item here is update status of proposed citizen member of the planning committee. So let me say that the Ashland County Board approved Charlie Ortman as a citizen of the planning committee. But at our prior meeting, we approved that members of this committee who are members of the county board be designated to lead the discussion or the gathering of information or communications with regard to specific plan elements. And I would ask for a motion to approve that Charlie Ortman be included in that group.
This is Pat. I'll make a motion to include Charlie in taking the lead.
Motion by Pat Kenny. May I hear a second, please?
Brad will second.
Second by Bradley Ray. The motion is to approve Charlie Ortman as leader of one of the plan elements as we go forward in collecting information for the plan. Mr. Kinney.
Prior to this motion, were you including Charlie in your planning process as we look forward today, or are you anticipating making some modifications based on adding Charlie?
I have anticipated the approval of Charlie to be included in this process.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
And I would ask comment from Mr. Ortman with regards to the city's approval or limitations on your participation in the committee.
I'm free to participate however the committee sees fit. What I'm not free to do is commit the city to any kind of activity without talking to them first and getting the approval of the council or the department that we're asking to help us.
All in favor of approving Charlie? Did we just vote? This committee is voting to accept him in that role. in the role of leading one of the plan elements. In our prior meeting minutes, it stated that only county board members on the committee would be included in that role. And I'm adding Charlie to that role of leading one of the plan elements. Yeah. Okay. Are we good? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry if I doubled up there, but we have to carry on. So item B, proposal for the scheduling Ashland County Planning Committee to meet for, I'm reading the minutes. I'm so terribly sorry. Oh, man. There we go. Yeah, I beg your pardon. I was reading the minutes. Okay, so item A is actually proposed plan segments and sequencing. Sorry to confuse everybody. So that's open for discussion. And I believe you have attached to your package a proposal to that effect, which looks like this. Pretty simple. Okay. So the works that I drafted for this meeting are based on this allocation, which includes all of the legally required elements, and groups a couple of them so that we can have someone to focus on the attention each grouping. So the way I've put this, and we'll talk about who's agreed to lead each segment in a minute, but I've stated, put it as intergovernmental cooperation, trends and issues, cultural resources and community facilities, agricultural and natural resources, which include forestry, transportation and utilities, housing, land use, economic development, risk and opportunities, and implementation. And that would seem to be comprehensive. Is there a comment on that? And it should be, yeah, Lisa.
I agree with these. I'm wondering if, since the original plan has utilities and community facilities together as one chapter or one element, that we might stick with that format. I know the group that I've been convening to look at each of these elements through the lens of impacts from weather, extreme weather, that they're combining community facilities and utilities into one work group.
Other thoughts on this subject? Charlie?
I've got 2 pages of what seem to be the same elements, but some of them are have more items under them. Are we supposed to use both of these or the one with more? It's page 6 and page 7. Yeah. The page 7 is more, has more meat to it.
Separate agenda item. First is the elements, and then the mapping of county departments to different elements, and then the mapping of different county committees to different elements.
Okay. Thank you.
Pat?
Alyssa, when you said what you said, were you looking backwards from if the comp plan is done, here's where things would go, and then from that looking in the direction of this direction where we're at now? And George, were you looking at it from the things we got to deal with and then envisioning mapping towards where we end up? Because I mean, personally, I would look at where we want to end up and work backwards from that. And I'm just wondering if you two are coming from 2 different points, and if you are, what you would say to each other to decide how we do that.
Melissa, you care to comment?
Sure, it's a good question. I don't think there's a really right or wrong answer. You know, I think you could look at it from different ways and still get to your end result. When we're pulling the guest list together for the community facilities and utilities as one element, like it had been, we were bringing together people who had maybe similar missions, like large services to be conducted for the whole county. So you've got county departments, as well as large-scale utility places like the Norvado and Xcel Energy and the solar installation group. So facilities and utilities serve very similar functions in providing big level services to most of the county. So that's why we had kept it together, using the same priorities in the current version, but really what you propose, you're still going to be discussing all of those things, so you'll get your answers. It's just maybe doesn't have the same flow.
I think it's about flow and maybe a little bit different thinking about what's included in each group. So when I think of cultural resources and community facilities, I'm thinking hospitals, schools, services for food, like the brick. And when I'm thinking about utilities, I'm thinking about things like roads, water, electricity generation. And to me, they are more in that infrastructure, basic infrastructure domain, and then cultural resources and services to the community in terms of education, medication, social work, work of the Health and Human Services Department is more in that cultural area, senior center, that type of thing. But as I see it, this is a way of just dividing up what's going to be in the plan. And then I've spoken to each of you individually about who would be willing to work on different elements, except that you and Eric are full-time people who have very job responsibilities and may have different levels of ability to help facilitate this process. But I wanted each member of the committee to focus on part so that we wouldn't all be really trying to handle the whole thing. So we sort of divide and conquer. And that's the reason for this. So if we could let this stand for now and take your assignment into consideration and maybe modify it at our next meeting.
Yep, and we'll find then, if you want to do it that way, this group, when they convene, which will be the next couple weeks, the community facility utilities, will find a way to make recommendations that you can extract from their list and put them wherever you find them to be more fit, if you want to stay with it as it is. So it's
Yeah.
okay with me.
So one thing I was thinking on that is we're asking other people to participate, come to meetings, et cetera. And I'm wondering if there's certain groupings where, say, one person, one company, one person from a town board, whatever, might be able to say, if these things are grouped in such a way, I can go to one meeting, hit those things because they naturally go together. But in another way, some of those people or companies might have to come to multiple meetings. And so if you thought there was this grouping that's kind of natural, it might mean some people go to fewer meetings than having to split between more meetings. But we can let this sit and then decide it later.
Further comment?
Maybe I like that. And maybe the last thing I'd say is the groups that I've been convening all along have been looking at these different elements through the lens of impacts on those elements through extreme weather. But you also want a group who are just saying, we need a lot to think about regardless of what happens with our weather, what's going to happen with growth and that kind of thing. So I agree with you. There might be multiple meetings. But I think your end game is that people will come in where they want to. Like I know I've invited people to talk about how weather has affected their solar installations in their town or their business. And they said, yeah, I don't see any impact. I support what you're doing, but that's not of great importance to me. So then they might want to come to just talking about how are we going to increase our use of renewable energy if that's one of your goals, and not have to come to my meeting too.
With your permission, I think it'd be appropriate to jump to item 5E, which is the assignment of individuals' plan segments to individual members of this committee, which has been mostly agreed in advance. Let me pass this out.
I've got, I'm gonna come back to the same question I've had since the beginning of this whole episode. At what point do we get Northwest Regional Planning involved? Because we could sit for meeting after meeting spinning our wheels where they have the expertise to tell us you're going in the right direction versus the wrong direction. I mean, we're gonna spend a lot of money with them to help us do this. And maybe they could say, we're on the right track or we're spinning our wheels on something that isn't right.
Anybody else want to comment on that question? Liz?
Might be a different question. With the comprehensive plan, do we have the previous plan and we could look at that and see how the trends have changed and where we need to work on things? And see what what groups they've involved in the past and see where that could, where we can improve.
Dan?
Liz, the current plan was emailed to everyone. If you'd like a printed copy, I can make you one after work, after the meeting.
Other thoughts, Charlie?
Yeah, tagging on to what Gary said, I guess I'd really like to, I mean, I think it's great that we're moving ahead kind of with what we think is going on, but it'd really be clarifying to see what they, if I knew what they're going to do, and then that would help me decide what I might need to do or where we need to make stuff up. So when, are they going to brief us at some point soon, or?
Dan?
Next Wednesday, the board is voting to hire them. And they will have a couple representatives here to give a presentation about what they do and what they see as a timeline. And they'll be able to answer any question the board member may have. You're welcome to attend the meeting too. And not speaking for Chair Mertig, but I assume he'll let you ask questions too. Next Wednesday at 9:00. 26. Yeah.
Right. So the intention of this framework at this point is to cast a wide net to enable input from our county departments, for them to be invited to say what they might want to comment on, to our county committees to say what they might want to comment on, and then to reach out to the broader community, to the townships, to see whether they have things that they would like to comment on. So we're setting up a communication structure here, which is all in support of anything that Northwest Planning as our consultant would be engaged in. So we're not really ahead of the game. We don't have them on board yet. And if they were on board, we'd want them to be here today. But that's the intention of this. So this handout I have is just who has agreed to work on which plan elements. And Charlie agreed to work on the intergovernmental. Trends and issues are really a full committee, and I look to Alyssa to be supportive of that, please. Cultural resources and community facilities. Liz said she'd be willing to work on that. Pat said he'd be willing to work on agricultural and forestry and natural resources. I'd be interested in working on transportation utilities. Brad volunteered to help with housing. Gary said he could work on economic development, and I included land use there. And then we get around to risk and opportunities. Well, that's really the full committee, and Liz has been collecting information on that regard. And then we get around to implementation, maybe a year from now, but it really comes down to the consultants and staff work. And then approval, it has to come to the county board. And then finally, there's submission. So that's kind of the outline of a year and a half of work, probably. And just we have a way of thinking about how we're going ahead. And I noted down in my notes here for discussion towards the end of this agenda, how we might proceed. And I think that by the end of June, we ought to have at least invited input from departments, committees, and as to whether they have concerns or things that they would like to comment on in in all of the different plan elements, Lisa, from all these different sources. And then by the end of September, I think we should have gotten at least some invited and gotten some input from the governmental units like the townships. And then I'm hoping that by the end of the year, we would have a draft of the elements and be able to move forward with something that could be reworked and discussed and have public hearings. Probably should really have public hearings before the end of the year and then a draft input by March. So that's kind of my intent. Is there a comment on that sort of rough timetable? Erica?
I do wonder if we should plan the timetable around when Northwest Regional Planning can get us the background historical factual information. So it's not exactly historical, but that whole sort of preview that was like 150 pages last time around of just like facts about the county in each particular area. I feel like that kind of education would be really enlightening for each specific committee as it comes together to talk about what they want to talk about, but also in light of what's actually happening that has been kind of like, written about from the experts. So I don't know how that would affect timing. It seems very realistic to be able to get that done by next March. But again, the Northwest Regional Planning timeline, I think, is.
Other comments? Okay, let me say, Pat.
This is maybe an observation thought or things I don't know the answers to yet, like a lot of things. But so as I look at the comp plan, in many ways, there's a lot of background information. It's clear Northwest Regional Planning has been doing comp plans up in this neck of the woods when you look at the format, the data, and all that good stuff. So there's lots of interesting information there. So on the one hand, what Gary says, getting them involved sooner than later, clearly they have an approach that they would recommend to us. And clearly they're going to pull a lot of information in as a starting point. But then when I look at, I was looking at forestry a few weeks ago. So I did this 8-week forestry adaptation class online, U.S. Department of Ag Forest Service, which may or may not exist after this next round of cuts with our federal government. And they told us, and all that stuff on the websites, all this information, really good stuff, it may not be there. But as I was looking at all of this, I've been immersed in this forestry stuff a lot over winter and soils and stuff, looking at my ground. And so I'm looking at that level of detail. Then I look at the comp plan and I'm like, there's not much in here. There's background information. So I looked at the county forestry plan, long plan, lots of detail, but it's not in our comp plan. I look at land and water conservation, there's a 2020 to 2029 plan in there. And so part of what strikes me is the comp plan is kind of big and broad and not a lot of what are we going to do? And I think as a board, how many of us are looking at the comp plan and saying, oh yeah, this is what we need to work on. We know how that is. What we look at are these plans from the departments where there's more specific goals and objectives. It seems if we're doing the comp plan, we should also see if there's any plans in our departments that we could update. So even though the one for land and water is 2020 to 2029, is there anything that based we're in the middle of that plan that we would like to start thinking about changing, adapting, whatever? Our forestry plan, a long plan, we're not going to stuff it into the comp plan, but there are things in there that we would want to look at. So as we're having these conversations, it strikes me that we really should think about updating the comp plan, but simultaneously, for the sake of efficiency and being current, we should also look at, do we want to modify any of these things in these department plans? And then, of course, there's implications for budgets if there's things that we want to do or getting grants and stuff. But to do the comp plan and not look at these other plans seems disconnected to me. And I'm not sure where to go with that, but it seems disconnected to leave them separate.
Lisa?
I totally agree. And I haven't really wanted to get the picture bigger because this is a lot to get a grasp on just the beginning of a comp plan, but you also have an Ashland County pre-disaster mitigation plan that if we're going to be looking, and I'm sure we will, we'll have to be looking at how our weather changes will affect all parts of our county. You need to look at that plan as well. And that's where I agree, Northwest planning, that should be our number one question. How do we integrate all these different plans? Because the other elephant in the room, in my room, is that every municipality outside of the county, there's 15 in Ashland County, they all have their own comprehensive plans. So how do we get lots of things to work together? And that is a question for regional planning because they deal with lots of municipalities that have many plans. How do they incorporate them all? I think what you're doing right now, kind of an answer to your question, Gary, I don't think you're getting ahead of it, but I agree with you, George, that you want to set the stage now before regional planning while you have some time to educate, as you've brought up, your committees and your department heads and say, here's what's coming. And regional planning, by the grace of God and all the money in the state budget is going to pay for regional planning to come in, but you don't want to wait until because I think CBDG people told us that we might not find out we got the grant till like June or May, right? You remember any of those dates?
No, they promised to get back to us within a month of when we submit.
Okay. That's
And
good.
then we need to accept their offer within 45 days. So it'll be fast.
So April 26th, hopefully you hear about it, whether you got it or not, that's a month. And then 45 days is into May. So you want to be doing this background work to get the rest of your county ready. So when you finally get the go button, maybe it's June 1st, everybody's teed up. And here comes regional planning to just help you with a lot
Liz?
of the parts.
I agree with Lissa, that we can, get our end of the bargain done here, get all the input that we can. So when we do, get with Northwest, Regional Planning, that they have the information going ahead that we need, what do we need to budget and everything. And every aspect of the comprehensive plan, that'll be solid before then.
Erica, do you want to talk about pre-accepting?
So at next week's board meeting, we can pre-accept, assuming that Decker approves CDBG funds to us, so that we can jump the gun on the 45-day waiting. We can just accept it, and then they will be able to start transferring funds, right, as soon as or within a much shorter time frame, within weeks of the acceptance. I don't know that that is necessary. However, I don't know if Northwest Regional needs to be paid within the next month, right? Or within the next 2 months. And I don't know, the life of the grant is going to be just fine, right? Within the kind of acceptance period, but I guess I don't see any real benefit to forcing that next week on top of everything else we're doing at that meeting, instead of just pushing it 1 month later, which will be within the 45-day waiting period. Wanted to say just one other thing regarding Pat's and Lissa's comments. I guess the way I see how we incorporate input from all committees, to me, it's of course valuable everywhere in the comp plan, but I would say its number one value is when we create goals and objectives for every subsection of the comp plan, right? That's where we want alignment, when we can find it with various departments, various municipalities, kind of everywhere else, so that everybody's on that same train. As long as we have all agreed on the front side, right? So that then we can together check those things off as we go through the next 10 years.
Any other comment? I'm going to disagree because I don't think we know what our goals and objectives are until we listen to the community. And listening to the community means we listen to our departments and we listen to our committees and they listen to their fellow committee members and other board members, and we listen to the towns. And so this framework is designed not to decide what's going to go into the plan, but to find out what the population would like to see in a 20-year horizon. Because we don't know. We're just a group of people sitting in this room. So I anticipate that there's a parallel process here, that the consultants, in this case, we're assuming Northwest Regional Planning, comes on board. There's an awful lot of data update. So if that's what you're talking about, in terms of all the information that's going to go into deciding what is practical and makes sense in terms of planning. But at the same time, we can be listening, because as public representatives, that's our job. That's basically what we're here for. The county board could just hire a consultant and say, write a plan, but we're here to listen. So that's why I'm proposing these stages, and why I've asked that we divide the responsibilities of the committee so that we can not have a lot of cross communication. So we have this entire listing of committees and commissions that, to which county board members are assigned. And probably every one of them should be invited to give an input. I yield to Pat. You want to say something?
Well, I think you're in many ways both saying the same. I think we're all on the same page. So when I talk about looking at the plans of the departments, if there's things that we want to change there, what that's saying is, as what we're thinking about the comp plan, listening to the public, et cetera, there's something different than we see in those plans of the departments. So we could potentially simultaneously be making updates to both by listening and getting input, as you say. But then, as Erica said, these goals and objectives in the comp plan and our department plans, when we're done, no matter how we get to where we're going, if they don't mesh, we've got a problem, because the comp plan would say one thing and department plan saying other. So it's a work in progress, I think, on both. And to do a comp plan without looking at department plans could only lead to potentially missing some things we could have changed and updated, or we have things where there's conflicts on what we're saying we want to do. So I don't see how we don't do both and then make them consistent, as Erica said.
Erica?
I just want to say I'm sorry that you felt we disagreed, because I felt like you said exactly what I said, but with slightly different contexts.
Bad choice of words. Dan, maybe you could explain what a planning horizon is for county departments, because I don't know that they're really thinking 10 and 20 years.
Yeah, no, county departments are thinking more 5 years ahead. A great example is Highway Committee. They're thinking about our highway department. They're thinking about what roads are we going to repair in the future? And so they come up with a 5 and 6 year plan. Same in the city. They do 5 and 6 year plans for roads. Mary Jo is thinking around 5 years ahead too. 10? Yeah. So they're really they're looking more short term.
So, yeah, Alyssa, go ahead.
And you made the mistake of putting me on the implementation element, because I want to recommend that you spend on January 2nd, a couple of hours going through it every year. So you don't have this big massive thing that everybody's forgotten about in 9 years and you try and review it. You just spend a short amount of time going through your goals and objectives and say, what did we accomplish? And then, note those in your plan, and then your 10-year or your 5-year review goes a lot easier. That's going to be my recommendation. And the only other quick thing I'll say is really, I love this getting out in front and getting input from the departments and the community and the board. Really, the first things you want to focus are like the issues and opportunities, because that's going to drive your goals and objectives and actions, and also the discussions in each of those elements. And you might want to throw in there your risks and opportunities as well. That's where you should get a lot of your public input from all these groups you've identified.
Let me throw in here, I totally agree. Implementation on this schedule was meant to be getting the plan published. But I totally agree that now that we have a permanent planning committee, that there ought to be annual review. Other comments? Okay, so the next couple of items have The next couple items, B, C, have to do with identifying county departments and county committees to these different elements. And I'm not sure this is the right communication process, but I think the thing we most have to watch out is a lot of confusing cross communication. So initially, when I wrote this up, I thought each one of us assigned to a plan element could coordinate communication aligned with different departments and or committees. But as Lissa has appropriately pointed out, any one of those committees might be affecting any of the plan elements. They might have comments or inputs on any of those elements. So I don't know if it's, I think it'd be further discussion in terms of your resources, Dan, and with Lissa and Erica, whether Lissa and Erica could perhaps be we could design a survey to go out, and you could be like the recipient of inputs from the committees, and Erica would be a recipient of inputs from the departments. And then you could channel those to the individuals of us who have agreed to focus on an element. So you would be the communications hub to get inputs from the committees and from departments. And I don't know if that works with you, Dan, but it seemed more practical than what I actually mapped out here.
Yeah, it does. And yeah, because I'm looking at are we on B, 5B?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at your list here of different departments, and it's not completely inclusive. I mean, there are other departments that are going to be wanted part of certain items, like ag and natural resources. We do need to include highway in that because they do gravel mine permitting. Transportation, we want to include land conservation in that because those two departments work together, especially when there's wetlands issues. Land use would also have to include treasurer. I think there are other departments that are going to want to be part of some of these other these sets, because a department like HHS can fit into a lot of them because they do so much in this county. So I just wanted to point out, this is not all inclusive. This is just the starting list.
Right. So I myself, I totally agree. I think my initial concept is misdesigned, but I didn't know whether you were agreeable to having, for Alyssa would be agreeable and Eric would be agreeable to be communication hubs for county committees and for county departments. And then if it's housing, you send it over to Brad, or at least keep Brad in the loop as kind of the subcommittee on housing, subcommittee of this committee. So then when a question comes up in a county board meeting and they ask me about housing, I'll point at Brad and be like that. And if it's about if it's a departmental question and if it's about utilities, you're going to point at me or keep me in the loop there. And this, in my mind, this is all just about seeing inviting, not even recommendations, but what are their concerns or what are they thinking about for 10 to 20 years? If anything, maybe they have nothing to say, but they should be invited to say it, is my view. Pat.
Are you proposing to put all this information gathered from different committees and groups online somewhere where all of us can access it? So that, let's say with forestry, someone says, well, what about roads, and getting trucks out? That if we can see then what highway has, and if we think there's a gap there or there's an inconsistency, that we can identify that.
I think that would be a future decision after we see what kind of input we would get, because it might be overwhelming, or maybe it needs to be summarized or consolidated. In the meantime, if you're working on ag and forestry, all the inputs on ag and forestry are coming to you.
No, all I'm saying is whatever information is gathered, if I could say, go to a folder in a Google Drive, and if I wanted to, I could say, look at that and see if highway has anything related to roads that I think might impact forestry. Just so I could access it if I wanted to.
George?
Yeah, well, the easy way to do that is to,
George,
check with me on transportation and housing and utilities. Because I have all the information just come in on highways, because highways would be related to that.
Right.
Yeah, Dan.
So Rachel already set up a website on Outlook for that. I did send the link to everybody to, and I can send it again. Which is the central information drop. So everything will be dropped into that folder. So any one of you are capable of seeing if it's housing. Pat, you're interested in housing, you can go look at all the housing information there. Gary, if you want to see about forestry stuff, it's all there. I think we could create separate folders for each topic. So so when you guys get the information, you can forward it to Erica or I, or both, and we can drop it into that main folder for everyone. So the whole committee, and really, we should give the address to the entire board too, because I do know some of these topics are going to be other board members who want to be involved. And, like, I know Blake Ellison is probably going to want to be involved in housing a little bit. That's one of his issues. And also the facilities. He's actively trying to get a YMCA here. So that would sort of fall in the facilities plan. So I think we should give all the supervisors an opportunity to contribute to whatever portion they want.
Did you say Rachel sent a link to a folder that we could be?
Yeah, I sent it to everybody, but I can send it again.
Yes, if you don't mind, I haven't seen it. I
Yeah,
did.
it was a couple
arrange-
months ago.
I did arrange through Extension and Rachel to get a generic email address so that when we put out information, my name's not going out all over the place. It says something like county outreach at ashlandcounty.wi. So that'll go out on all of the outreach materials, but it'll come to me and I can ask it to also be immediately sent to Erica. That's just Rachel hitting two buttons. So we will have that as a vehicle for email responses to come back to us. And then you would have to talk to probably regional planning. This would cost a lot of money, but a survey like to your general public. I don't know if anybody's been thinking about that. I think you did that in the past. Electronic survey for the general public to give you their input.
The chair would like to recognize the inclusion of Clarence Campbell, board member, and would invite him to speak. Let us know if you need to say anything, Clarence. Get a draft perspective, because we agreed at our last meeting to try to have a one-pager to basically say to the consultant, which we assume is Northwest Regional Planning, and to the county board as a whole, kind of what we're doing. Does everybody have a copy of this? I have extra copies of that. So the question is, do we want to modify this? This is just a draft or something I pulled together to be able to say at the county board meeting what we're kind of about. So, Dan, are we having Northwest Regional Planning present at this county board meeting?
Yes, Northwest Regional there will be two people coming from there presenting at the board meeting before we vote on all the CDBG stuff. So those two people will be able to answer any questions about the role they play into it.
So this perspective is intended to be something that all members of the county board could take a quick look at, and that the people, representatives from the planning commission from Northwest Regional could take a look at, and have a sense of what this committee intends. So since we're the committee and this is a draft, it'd be good to know whether we should modify this in terms of what our intentions are. Anybody have comments? let's take a couple minutes just to look at it. So at the same time that this is presented to the county board and to the consultants, it is inviting them to comment and suggest alterations as well. It's a first invitation for input in essence from the county board. Any suggestions for modification? Because of course it's just a first go at telling them what we're trying to do. Dan?
Yeah, under work plan, formatting of plan elements and final report and preparation of final report is going to be Northwest Regional. Yeah. And this committee is going to tell them what the committee would like to see, but they're going to actually put it together.
So would the same apply to the second to bottom line, preparation of final report?
Yeah, that's part of what we're paying them for.
Other suggestions? There being no other suggestions, just move on. By the end of June, we should have invited and hopefully received any concerns or ideas that would come from our departments and committees. It could be a rather quick turnaround. And then hopefully by the end of September, we should have been able to acquire any concerns or inputs or subject matter or ideas from our townships and other governmental units. And then hopefully then by the end of December, we will have been able to hold public hearings because we will have basically gotten input from our departments, our committees, and from the townships. And so we'd be prepared to have individuals comment at a public hearing. And then my thinking, by the end of March next year, we should have some form of draft written by the consultants with our inputs. And once you have a draft, then, you can take 6 months to revise it. Better suggestions, please.
Are they actual public hearings or just like public input where you give a little 10-minute, what's comp plan? Why is it important to you? Or is it an actual hearing where there's something that the public has to vote to support or something?
I don't think it's something that the way I conceive of it is that we're getting public input all the way along the line in terms of inviting people to participate in discussions and provide input on the different subject matter. And we allow a comment period at our meetings, if anybody wants to come and talk at our meetings about an agenda item. And so I believe that we ought to be holding a couple of formal public hearings on the overall plan as it is sort of coming together. So it's still moldable if the public really has a strong input. And I thought we should probably have that done by the end of the year, at least have a couple of public hearings. I don't even know what our legal requirement is.
Yeah, that's do we have legal requirements for public hearings?
Yeah, we do. But Northwest Regional will be explaining all of that detail.
Okay, because I would lean to shying away from the rigor and the of a public hearing doesn't allow for input usually,
Yeah.
because you have to follow an agenda and you can only do certain, you can be on the record, but there's no back talk or anything like that. So I think informational meetings and input gathering meetings with the public is something totally different than hearings, and we should do that in December, depending on what legally is required for hearings. Because again, if a member of the public comes up and says something, that's it. That's all they got. We can't ask them follow-up questions or anything like that because it's a hearing.
Yeah.
It's a legal process, and so we want to avoid hearings and only do what's legally required of us in hearings.
I'm not sure I can understand that. Pat?
If necessary, to have a public hearing, because in the public hearing, the public can only speak, you can't respond. On the same agenda, you could have your public hearing, and then right after that, open discussion on the comp plan, and then, you basically tell the public up front, okay, we're gonna have a hearing, we're gonna get through that. You can speak, but we can't. And right after that, we're gonna have an agenda item where we can talk to each other. So you're all there at the same time and meet the legal requirement if you have to.
Alyssa?
I appreciate you adding more meat to that definition because it seems a little early for a public hearing if we don't have a first draft. Like even after you had a first draft, then you might want to have a more formal approach. But if you just had general public input meetings, then that to me is really different. You could say, hey, a draft's coming out in 3 months and this is our last big chance to get public input. That would be good. From an educator's point of view, I never have successful meetings in December, just throwing that out there. People are really preoccupied. I love let's do something by the end of the year with mixed success, unless you had a cookie potluck at the same meeting.
Dan?
Yeah, I think Alyssa's right about the end of the year. Pretty much once you hit November, the public is tuned out. They're getting ready for Thanksgiving and hunting season. And there's Christmas stuff going on from Thanksgiving to January. It's really right after November elections, people tune right out until the next year. So I would say if you wanted to do a public hearing, public meeting, that kind of thing, you do it in January when people are back around. And yeah, it's postponing it a month, but you're going to have more likely success. And I'm going to be honest, we can hold hearings in Town of Morris, we can hold them in Glidden, but the amount of people you're going to get is slim to maybe sometimes zero.
Erica?
Just asking for a quick clarification. George, I believe you said that by the end of June, we wanted to invite and receive concerns and ideas from county departments, municipalities, and community groups? Who was going to lead?
By the end of June, I'm trying to
Oh.
do a quarterly kind of for simplification. You're not going to meet these targets exactly.
Sure,
But
sure.
the first target, I thought, end of June, maybe July,
Yeah.
was committees and departments. Nothing
Okay,
else.
not municipalities.
And then
Okay.
allowing the next 3 months or plus or minus to reach out to the townships. And then after that, to allow input from the general community. But I'm with Brad. I don't think we need to do any more than the legal requirement there. But I may be wrong, but misled my remembering of reading of the statute is that, the public hearings are required. And that, you announce public hearing, it's here. People can come if they want to. If they want to drive up or drive down, come over from Madeline Island, or be on Zoom. And if we're just listening, that's fine. That's meeting that requirement, and it's another avenue for us to get some opinions before we start solidifying things into a draft. And then I imagine we're required to have a public hearing after we've got a proposed written up plan. If we all have in mind that's roughly the timetable, it doesn't have to be set in stone. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. Other comments?
Well, I think the timetable is reasonable, but, and a big but, I think before we set one in, even not in stone, that we should wait for Northwest Regional, because they've been doing this for a very long time, and, they probably have a timetable that really works, and maybe we should go along with that.
Comments, Pat?
I've mentioned this to George before, but the last election for county board, a third of the board turned over between people that chose not to run or lost. So it's kind of nice to be to a point where for the board, whatever we need to do is pretty wrapped up by March, and it's just tweaks after that, because we really don't know what the future holds after March of next year.
Further comments?
I don't know how this fits in, but I would love to see on these, by the end of June, that the agendas for these department meetings and committees have a standard agenda item, like public input and comments on the comprehensive plan.
Alyssa, if they just put input to the comp plan on their agenda, they all have a public comment period on it, so anybody can come in and talk about it.
You want to just keep it like general public comment and not
Yeah,
make it
the
specific?
chair can extend public comment if the chair chooses.
Okay, because I know people are going to be looking for these opportunities.
Yeah.
Let me say that I actually wasn't looking for the public input to the committees and the committee's input to us. I was simply looking for the committee's input for us, but I agree that June is, because subcommittees are just once a quarter, so June would be overly aggressive. But I don't think it's necessary for those committees to hold input hearings themselves.
No,
That they should, but when they have a meeting, they put it on their agenda and they say, is there anything we want to feed into as long-term concerns or ideas for planning? That's all.
thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yep.
Individual commentary for each planning committee member. So,
Yeah, don't take this as negative. I'm hoping we have public input, but I almost will bet money that the public comment will come from the northern part of the county and very little from the southern part. The southern part, I go to a lot of the town meetings. They have a comp plan, but you know where it is? Somewhere over in a corner collecting dust. They haven't looked at it in years. They haven't even got a clue what's in it. And I'm not bad mouthing them, but they were required to do it. They did it and they stuffed it away somewhere, and they don't have an idea of what it says or what's in there. I can guarantee you none of those supervisors even know where it is. It's there, but because I've asked, but so I'm hoping the public has a lot of input, but I'm a little negative on what I see in some of these areas with the towns, at least. Now, maybe when they're not talking about the town plan, but they're talking about a county plan, that'll bring out some better ideas. And I'm hoping that'll happen. But like I say, I've seen the town's plans, and you literally blow the dust off them. It's something they had to do, and they put it away, and they're worried about a culvert somewhere. And that's why I say, I think in the northern part of the county where we have a bigger population, no offense, but more diverse, we may get better input. We certainly want to welcome everyone, but the residents I serve have more things on their mind that don't seem to, you know, the county's kind of an afterthought to them at the point. The only time they're concerned about the county is when their tax bill comes.
Or the roads aren't plowed.
Right. But like I say, if we give them the opportunity, we'll see who comes out of the woodwork. I believe this area will have more input just because there's more people involved in civic and, you know, cultural things and what's going on. So, and again, I'm not bad mouthing the people I represent, but that's the least thing from their mind at this moment. I mean,
But, you know, they are represented through the committees and the
Correct.
departments and their supervisors. And I have a theory about this, is that if it's my township and something I have to do, I might want to just put it on the shelf. But if it's somebody else's responsibility and I can complain about things, oh yeah, I'd be happy to complain about a few things, no problem. So,
right. Right.
other feedback from the members of the committee?
Well, in response to what Gary said, so I've looked at the town plan in the township where the farm is that I grew up. And I think it's a nicely done plan, lots of good stuff. And you can almost tell, you know, when you know some of the people, who's the advocate for each piece. But there's two things that really struck me, maybe three. Two things really struck me. A lot of the things that they would like to do and see changed, either they don't have legal control over, things like how does somebody use their land and what they do to it. They don't have legal control. Two, a lot of these things we'd like to do to improve things require some source of funding. And if we look at funding for all our natural resource programs and you know, farm programs right now, we know what's going on there. So funding's got to come from somewhere. And the third thing, if I add that to the list, I got to ask myself, how much time am I willing to spend to be a contributor to the things the town would like to do? And I know that when I go out there, I'm busy enough with what I'm doing and I kind of stick to that. I'm not raising my hand and say, hey, there's some great stuff in here. What can I do to help? I'm not doing that either. So I look at that and it's a nice comp plan, but I also understand the challenge of doing more than taking care of the roads and those culverts and, you know, the basic things that statutorily they have to do. I'm not raising my hand to, and I'm not kicking in my money except on my land, which I control. So, you know, there's limits and.
Under the rest, Charlie?
Alyssa and Gary both made some good points. And I think our opportunity to address them is in the implementation element. We have two departments that are using it as a working document, at least. I know Mary Jo is and Lissa is to the extent they can. Perhaps they could document how they do that. And we could make a real good, here's how you use this. If you want to, and it's been done, so we're not inventing the wheel. And maybe Northwest Regional has some ideas on how to actually get this out there. Remember in 2000, when we did this last time, we set it up particularly so each department would have their little pieces to do and to utilize. It was supposed to be dog-eared. Well, we're partway there, so maybe this time we'll get even a little further. Thank you.
Liz?
I think I was involved in something with a planning committee with city council. So it's good to have all these elements to go by and have a template and some good ideas. But like Pat said, you know, the funding sources. So I'm going to be new at that. And, you know, I just want to know my role. I am completely committed. When I ran, I'm, you know, even though I work 2 jobs, I say, you know, this is my priority too, that I have to know and I have to do what's best for our community. So I want to know, you know, what's my plan going forward? How do I implement this, you know, to my cultural resources? What's my next plans? What's my next steps before a next meeting? Or are we just right here, right now, just kind of planning things?
Rebecca?
So two things. One, George, if you would like to assign me to one of the proposed segments with planning committee members or more, I would be happy to do so. I sort of think that I might fit best under trends and issues or economic development or risks and opportunities, just because I feel like I'm kind of constantly reading and forecasting where we can go with grant searches and what we can do. Secondly, in addressing Gary and Pat and multiple other thoughts today, I have been thinking a bit about, is there a way we can include plans in the comp plan that will tie sort of the entire county together so that we can begin to overcome a kind of north-south possible divide around particular ideas that a lot of people are really passionate about. And the one that keeps coming back to me is outdoor recreation and a kind of systematized, connected set of multi-use trails that will connect, hopefully someday, from Butternut all the way up to Ashland. So several months ago, Alyssa assisted in helping me put together a group of over 30 people across the county, more than half of which lived in Glidden or south of Glidden, that wanted to see this come into effect and wanted to apply for this technical assistance opportunity, which we have not heard back about because it was all EPA, and I have no idea if we will ever hear back about it. But there have been other opportunities coming up that I've been sharing with that group that, like, people are still on board with that as like a passionate idea for both economic development and for rural recreation for us, but also for tourists. And so I'm wondering if we could invite the people within that group to sort of who are passionate about that, and then maybe hook them into other elements of the plan, and or just seed that we sort of know that there's a collected body of people across the county that are interested in that.
So Pat, isn't recreation part of forestry committee?
Yeah, I just made some notes. Really interesting that you said that, because I've had a couple conversations with people about the lack of snow on the snowmobile trails, and I think it's Arctic Cat that ceased production as of January 1st, and then we get the UTVs out there, and what's going to happen to the snowmobile trails? Are there going to be more UTV trails? And of course, where are those folks going to stop and, you know, have some beverages and food? And then the county, we have very few county parks compared to Bayfield County. You know, we've got Copper Falls, which we've underutilized as a resource. So it's interesting you mentioned that, because in many ways, some other people are sort of thinking the same thing as a transition from lack of snow and changing those trails and doing that sort of thing. I think that would really resonate with people. So I just made a note, you know, it's part of forestry. The parks that we've talked about several years ago, trying to do more with parks in the county forest and get some of that economic impact. So I think that's a great thing to pursue.
Lisa, you want to take a turn?
I'm sorry, but
Well, we're going around the room. Is there anything
Oh,
more you want to
yeah.
add?
I have three quick things. I agree. I told you when we started, I'm a planning nerd. I love it. It's a chance to think about where you've been and where you want to be, but I think I'm the alien in the room, that most people are not into the planning and it's something for the shelf. So what I'm thinking about is, what can we do to embed something fun in this and change that idea? And maybe it's something as simple as finding funding to pay for a user-friendly copy like the city of Ashland has. It looks like a roadmap, and you open it up and it's got all of your goals on it and what the county's vision is, and you can open it and put it on your wall. It's beautiful. It has pictures, you know, like a user-friendly copy. And then this annual review of what you have written and say, how are we tracking with all those goals and actions? Just a short review. So I'm throwing out the idea that now we start thinking about ways to get those plans off the shelf and get it into something that people want to use and feel proud about. That's number one. Number two, I don't know, George, if you want Erica, not, yeah. Yeah, that is. So that's the land use map that you have. Yep. And then on the back are each of your elements with your visions and goals and some nice pictures. The city of Ashland has one, and then Bayfield County has one. So that would be a way to just get the actions on it in front of everyone, and every department would have one, and give it to your businesses and your libraries and that kind of thing. Then the second thing is about incorporating the southern part of the county, which is absolutely important. And most of my work now is in the southern part of the county. But I told this to George, Erica and I said, one of the things that your CBDG grant wants to see is make sure you're reaching low and moderate income people. LMI, it's called, is an important part of that. And also seniors, because I learned that by 2030, the percentage of people over 65 in Ashe County will be 40 to 43%. So 40 to 43% of our population will be over 65. That's phenomenal. And they have a whole bunch of different needs than, young families. Pat's going around the room. So Erica and I said, well, let's test this out. We made a really short little flip side 1-page survey that we took down to the senior lunches in Glidden and Butternut. And we passed it around to the people there, and it was kind of a light visit day. They had lots of different conflicts with the schedule. So it wasn't their full house. We'll go again. But we sat and talked with people and heard from them, and they said some really cool things that we're going to incorporate in this as public input. So we're strategically going down there, going to town board meetings. I know a bunch of guys in Glidden, can I come to your meeting to make sure that they're incorporated? And do you want to say who we heard of, the two things that people love the most in Ashland County?
Oh my gosh, all of the people that we spoke to in Butternut love BART. The bus system is so important to every single senior that we spoke to. And I'm forgetting the other thing. What was the other thing?
The other thing was a county employee. It's Amy Janisek in HHS. She is the senior program assistant to help people with benefits and get services that they need. And we heard several people call her out by name, which we thought was fabulous. So I sent an email to Amy and Terry Barningham and said, you got called out at these senior meetings as people who, a person who your constituents really appreciate. So we want to be really intentional about getting all of these people, but especially the most vulnerable, the seniors, low and moderate income, maybe homebound people, that kind of thing. So I don't know if that it addresses kind of your fear that no one's going to give us feedback or they won't care about the plan, but
Conversations from the Brookside folks and those folks in Butternut that, they appreciate the county was there. And maybe it's a situation as a county, we need to say to ourselves at some point, maybe we do a county board meeting somewhere other than Ashland once. And well enough in advance, let the public know. Because a concern I always have is, well, county's in Ashland. Well, I represent you, but that's not good enough for, they don't see a lot of things. And I'll give you a good example of where it's coming from. If you drive south out of Ashland, you will see the ditches cleared, really nice. No trees no trees in the way, nothing. And the farther south you get, less and less it is. Now, that's not the county's problem. That's the state of Wisconsin who contracts the county to do that. I can't go to a single meeting without a constituent telling me, what about the southern half of the county? What's the worst road in the county? Glidden to Butternut. It's not scheduled till 26 for culverts, 27 for paving. That road is terrible. Those are the things we hear about, but maybe someday, like you guys did, which they appreciate, is maybe at some point we do a county board meeting somewhere other than Ashland once, but let it be known and see if those constituents can come, and then in comment period, they can say what they want. Because they do feel that at times, it's too far away. I mean, you have to realize where I come from. We're 50 miles to the nearest Walmart.
Yeah.
When my kids went to college, no one at college could believe you could live anywhere 50 miles from a Walmart. We have one grocery store 12 miles from my house. That's where the seniors appreciate Bart. Bart comes to them and picks them up. So those are the kinds of things that I agree. The more we're seen, and that's why I go to at least 3, sometimes 4 of the town meetings. I don't represent the one anymore, but I go because sometimes that's the only contact they have with the county. So,
Nice job.
but they did, I've talked to multiple folks at Brookside and they appreciated somebody talking to them. So,
The word got out, Erica.
yes.
Well, we'll have a meeting in Southern Ashe County and we'll have Bart drive everybody there.
Just a word in support of Gary's thought is that, so the Ashland School District, once a year, has its board meeting at Bad River, and once a year has its board meeting at Marengo Valley. So I don't know if you get the full county board to go along, but maybe. Gary, it's your turn to add anything else you wanted to add. Brad?
I'm really looking forward to having Northwest Regional Planning here next week so we can feel like we aren't maybe spinning our wheels in the mud that, like Gary pointed out earlier. And I think a lot of what's been said today is good, and I think it's good that we're on track and we're here to stay. One concern, and I know Pat kind of mentioned it, is the one thing I don't want to see is us all get into silos with these individual task assigns. And so I think we need to make sure that we are reporting back and keeping the other ones in mind when we might get comments, that we don't just throw that to the side so that it gets lost. Because I don't want to build a bunch of silos within the committee. So, but other than that, I think it's good that we all are taking ownership of the plan by having something that we're tasked with. And I think it'll be good. And next week should help my comfort level a little bit, I would hope. So.
Clarence, you want to make a comment of any kind?
Well, as I'm not on this committee, but I thought I'd stop in and kind of listen and see where you were at, and like hearing the comments about Health and Human Services and about Amy, because she does really do a great job. And as chair of Health and Human Services, I wanted to see how this, would incorporate into our meeting. So I'm glad I came and listened.
Dan?
Clarence, are you volunteering to join the committee?
I don't think I said that, did I?
Oh, I thought I heard that. Well, you're welcome to if you want to. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. One, if you look on our website and go into municipalities, all the municipalities are listed, and I'll just pick one at random, Jacobs. You look at the bottom, their comprehensive plan is there. So for all, so if you have a question about what the municipality is thinking or was thinking, well, I do know that LaPointe and Ashland are fairly up to date. Ashland did theirs a couple years ago, was it? It's right here. Yeah. Yeah. And LaPointe just did theirs last year. So theirs is brand new. Secondly, Erica, I see your role and my role in this as supporting all of them. Because they're gonna have questions and they're gonna want help and stuff. And I think our role is to support whatever they need. So.
Any other matters for the committee to discuss before we consider our next scheduled meeting date? Oh, here we have discussion of priority agenda items, right? Where? Oh, Pat, I'm sorry, I'm recognized.
I liked what Erica suggested that she do, and I understand Dan saying what he said, to maybe keep it informal. But from a finance perspective, as we look at the limited resources we have, and how we allocate those, the better a department or, can make the argument for what they're going to do. It's good to be able to look at a document and say, yes, this fits into your planning. Obviously for you, the grant writing fits in. And so I would really encourage you to be as proactive as possible, working with each of us so that we get things in there that support grant writing, support bringing the case to the county board for support for funding. It all in many ways relates to economic development. So you can bug the heck out of Gary. He's got that piece. Because, a lot of this is, like the trail system that you mentioned, et cetera, there's an economic development piece to, almost everything that we have. And if you see things, bug the heck out of us about getting it in there. So don't be shy, because that piece ultimately is really helpful, because the whole point of the plan is what do we want to do? And almost everything takes money. And I also want to mention Amy Janicek. Several years ago, working with somebody, she was a person I had a lot of conversations with. And I can't say enough good things about Amy Janicek and the time and patience she had with helping me and thus another person.
Charlie,
I don't know if this is gonna happen, but at some point, I hope we can get a search engine of some sort to parse the goals and objectives of all the plans that we're responsible for, the townships and our own, just to see the variety of them and the ones that are the same, to give us some idea where we might, as an advocacy tool, if 15 townships have decided they're really worried about snowmobile trails, or I think we could at least have a starting point. Yeah, AI. Those parsing programs have been available for 100 years. But that's all. Thank you.
Liz?
I like the idea of a survey that, could go out to each of those individual planning areas, and that would probably give us a lot more ideas to go forward. Thank you.
Further comment? So this falls right into this next agenda item, which is what are the priority agenda items for our next meeting? Working toward a survey that Liz suggested is probably a really critical item in my view. Other thoughts on that? Other thoughts, Erica?
I'm just wondering if we can have a kind of base survey, but I'm wondering if we should adapt it for county departments versus groups versus later on municipalities. Probably wouldn't be too hard. I'm just thinking we can be sort of more precise and specific with what we sort of prompt from departments, perhaps.
I think that's appropriate myself. Lisa?
And I can forward everybody the version that we used at the senior center. We kept it short and sweet because we were kind of told people don't really want to write stuff down. They'll talk to you. Although a couple of people wrote really extensive stuff, but yeah, it was 6 questions that we could share with groups or township meetings or but then when I brought up the survey, I was thinking about something that is electronic and you promote the heck out of a link to it, and it's longer. It's much more specific, like what you might ask professionals.
Okay, Pat?
So 2.
Well, Northwest Regional Planning may well have done
Yeah.
this, but pushing 5 years ago, Laura Negro and I volunteered to be on a subcommittee of finance to work with a survey Northwest Regional Planning was doing on broadband. And so they wanted to survey people on that. But here's the irony from a statistical standpoint. You're surveying people about broadband, you're reaching those with broadband, you're not reaching those without broadband. And therefore, are we getting a representative sample of input from across the county? So we then put more effort into paper copies or verbal interactions to get input, because, obviously we know in Ashland County, we would not get a representative sample and it would skew it towards those in Ashland. And that doesn't go towards solving the problem of the down county people feeling more included if we have a skewed survey due to lack of broadband on an online survey.
This-
Just one quick thing, a good survey, you send it out in as many forms and formats as possible. So I totally agree with you. Yep.
So in my way of thinking, that would be a priority item to have a draft formatted surveys or sub-surveys that might be like committee, departments, municipalities, but basic survey drafts that we could approve to go ahead with as of our next meeting. I suggest that after the county board meeting, I would send out a rough draft agenda for our next meeting that everybody could feedback on and, suggest better ideas. And then set up therefore, we, well in advance of our next meeting, have an agenda that we can be thinking about. But to me, the priority would be to have this survey designed and then how it would be disseminated. For our next meeting date, I don't know what people think. I was thinking maybe Wednesday, April 23rd. What are our thoughts?
Can we make it subject to the call of the chair so we can set up a time with Northwest Regional to be present?
Thoughts? Anybody else?
I support that idea in part because I'm gonna have a couple of dates, latter part of April, maybe early May at the latest, right? Might have something else I have to attend to, so later would be better for me on just a schedule.
Other thoughts? Okay, then the call of the chair would be a placeholder date of 1 o'clock on April 23rd, and we will change that appropriate to the things that are going on.
See, this the 23rd, whatever works for the committee, I'll be in Washington DC.
Okay.
Hopefully I'll be able to leave when I'm done.
Okay. So Gary, could you suggest a better placeholder from your perspective?
I would I agree, probably if Northwest Regional Planning would to be able to meet, maybe find out their dates and then hold a committee, whatever good for everyone. Yeah.
Okay, we'll put a tentative date on that draft agenda that I'll send out after the county board meeting next week then. All right.
We talked to Northwest Regional.
That being said, any further comments on the action part of the agenda?
Can I just say thank you for all the work that you put into this agenda and all of your documents to help us. It really helped me to sort through how you all are thinking and who does what. I found it to be very helpful. So thanks for that.
Let me say thank you for the thank you. And we will enter into our public comment and feedback as item number 7 on the agenda. Is there anybody online or present who would like to, from the public, who'd like to comment? There being nobody online and no representatives of the public present, we move on to request for a motion to adjourn. Was that Mr. Ortman? Move to adjourn. Is there a second? I don't even know.
Brad will second.
Mr. Ray, second. All in favor of adjourning? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.